So this video is going over copyright and images. I want to take the time in class to kind of go over actually like doing our demo. So I want to make sure though that you're clear about what copyright is, especially in relationship to the images that we use, and what royalty-free is, and why royalty-free images aren't always actually cost-free. So just a little bit of background, and make sure that we're all on the same page. Make sure that you understand these terms before you use any quote-unquote free images. We're going to go over one section like, can I use this image? And it depends a lot on where you got it from. So there's a few terms that are going to come up a lot when we start discussing free images and images on the web. And I want to make sure that we're really clear that we know what type of attribution might be required, if there's any payment required, and what do these things mean. So the first one is going to be Creative Commons. I'm going to go over that in a sec, but that's a specific type of license. Then there are things that are in the public domain, and that can vary a lot based on law. That can get really fiddly, especially in the US, in terms of what's considered under copyright or not. And then there are things that are created that are royalty free, and what exactly that means, because it doesn't mean what I think a lot of people think it means. So first off, Creative Commons. Creative Commons is a nonprofit organization, and it's kind of done a lot of the legal legwork for people. And a lot of royalty-free images actually come under Creative Commons licenses. So they've created these licenses, and there's more than one. There's various types of them. If you click on the link in our PDF here, it's going to talk about the different kinds of licenses. There are some that don't require any attribution. Then there are some that allow you to only say use it as in a mix, something where you have to substantially change the image in order to use it for free. There's some that you can only use for non-commercial reasons, using it for a class, totally non-commercial reason, but you couldn't say use it in a piece of work to actually promote a business. That you wouldn't be able to use it. There are some that if you do that, you're going to need to pay a fee. And there's some where you can use it as long as you credit the person who created the original image. Most of the ones that we're going to use are going to fall into that last category. And so that's why part of our assignment is going to be making sure that if there is a credit you need to give somebody, that that's included in your image so that you are on the right side of copyright. So if you want to share your own work under Creative Commons, there's a great tool that they have where you can go ahead and use that in order to pick the terms that you want, and it spits out the correct license for you. So I'm going to include that link in Blackboard. Most, not all, most Creative Commons images are available to use for free in non-commercial work. Non-commercial work is things like personal work, school work definitely falls under it, work for nonprofit organizations, and most of them are free in those circumstances as long as the original artist is credited. You're often going to see Creative Commons works in Wikipedia. Again, this does not mean all images on Wikipedia are free to use. You need to check the copyright of each and every image you find online to see if you're allowed to use it or not. And again, there are going to be some sites we go over at the end where everything on those sites is royalty free for work as long as you credit the person. But again, then you need to make sure that you credit the person appropriately. If you're not sure, because sometimes you'll see CC and a particular number, or it'll have some jargon after it. If you go to creativecommons.org, they explain what you can and can't do with each image based on the type of Creative Commons license it has. So again, that link will be in our Blackboard. Then there's public domain, which you've probably heard of. And again, it becomes a bit muddy, and it isn't exactly what maybe it used to be. Works that are in the public domain have had their copyright expire, or maybe their copyright was forfeited, or perhaps it's something that cannot be copyrighted. I just want to make absolutely clear that just because something is on the internet does not mean that it is in the public domain. In fact, almost every image on the internet is copyrighted. Assume a work is copyrighted unless it explicitly says that it is not. That is, unless it explicitly says, maybe this is a Creative Commons piece, or again, this is used for royalty free under these conditions. Otherwise, as soon as you make something, it's copyrighted. You don't need to apply for a copyright in the Copyright Office, especially in the United States. By creating a piece, it is like that making of an original thing means that you have copyright over it. And there are different copyright laws in each country, which is something that you need to be aware of. What copyright laws apply to the piece that you're working with? If you're working in the US, you do need to assume that you need to follow US copyright law, which is particularly geared towards the copyright holder, not the person who wants to work with the piece. So that means that most of the laws are on the side of the person. If you find an image on the internet, that person owns that image. You don't get to use it for free just because you think it would be a good fit for what you want to do. The law is more likely to be on the side of the person who took the original image. And so just kind of keep that in mind. There is a rather complex system nowadays that needs to be used in order to determine whether or not a work has entered the public domain in the US. Now, we've had a lot of changes. If you take media law and ethics, we'll go into this. And as it stands right now, it's shifted over the course of the 20th century. Before, it was a fixed term based in terms of when it was first published, and then there was a possible renewer term. Now, depending on when it was first published, it could be under copyright for 50 years, then 70 years, and then 70 years after the death of the author. So sometimes you'll see online anything that was made before 1924 is in the public domain. That's only true for published works. Now, I don't necessarily mean like pieces of paper, but I mean things that were published in National Geographic as a photo before 1924, or published as a book, or published as music. Things that were unpublished, things that were created but not commercially distributed, they are under copyright at least for the life of the author plus 70 years after the author died. So that means that if I painted a picture in 1924, that'd be kind of hard for me to do because I wasn't alive then, but if I was old enough to have done that, and then I lived until I was 100, so I'm not dead yet because we're not in 2024 yet. So I painted something 1924, lived for another 100 years, it would still be under copyright until 2094. So keep that in mind, depending on if the author's still alive, and if they died, was it 70 years ago in the past? That's going to determine whether or not you can use it. So that means that, there is a short window there between 1924 and 70 years ago now. We are coming up on 100 years from 1924, but it does mean that there are things that would have been made before 1924 that are still under copyright. So basically, public domain, really hard to determine. I will show you one site where you can find things that are in the public domain, and that's part of their job, is to determine that. What you're more likely to be able to accurately assess is if something is a royalty-free image. Now, I want to be super clear about this because this messes people up all the time. Royalty-free does not necessarily mean fee-free. You can be charged a fee, and oftentimes are, to use a royalty-free image. Royalties have to do with the amount of money that you pay every time you say publish something. If I could write an academic book, and every time someone used my textbook, I would get a royalty, and I would get more royalties if 100 people used my textbook than if one person used my textbook. That's royalties. So a lot of times nowadays, we will have to pay a one-time fee to obtain rights to use an image. Now, once we've paid that fee, we don't have to then pay royalties in perpetuity. We don't have to pay more if we use it 100 times or if we use it once. That's why it's royalty-free. It's a single charge in order to use that image. And then, again, there are certain restrictions on what you can use it for. Sometimes, for example, it'll say you can't then resell it on. But in general, if you're using royalty-free images, if you pay that fee once, you can use it as many times as you like. So the free only applies to the royalties. That means you don't have to pay every time you use it. If you want to know more about royalty-free images, there's this great guide that's online. You can click on the link here. It's also in Blackboard. Goes into more of the legalese and details. But for example, if you're going on Getty Images, on average, Getty is going to charge you $500 to use an image from their site. And you can use it 500 times, or you could use it once. It's still $500 either way. Now, Getty Images has a what's called microstock side. iStock Photo is owned by Getty. And so for them, you might be paying $5 to use that image, and then you can use it as much as you want. But you would still have to pay. Now, there are some royalty-free sites, and we'll get to those in a second, that allow you to use their pieces under a Creative Commons license for free, as long as you credit people. So that is a fee-free image. So the moral of the story, can I use this image? A lot of it depends on where you get it. Google? Probably not. Find out where it came from originally. If you can't figure out where it came from, you cannot use it. If it comes from a photographer site, well, you could reach out to the photographer and ask them if you can use it. Perhaps the photographer has given a Creative Commons license on all of their work. If it is online and it's, say, the photographer's website or Flickr or some other site and it's all rights reserved, you cannot use it without explicit permission from the person. If it's on Wikipedia, again, check the license that Wikipedia has it for. If it's just online, no, you can't use it. Did you find it from a news website? Probably not. News websites actually pay a fair amount of money in order to subscribe to a specific database of images. So those images they're allowed to use online for editorial purposes as much as they want. That doesn't mean that you get to use them too, not unless you pay to subscribe as well. If it's a stock photo on a news website, then it'll say it's a stock photo, and then you can go and find out where that stock photo came from. Wikipedia? Maybe. Check the license. If it's a Creative Commons license and it says that you can use it as long as you credit the person, and it's a non-commercial way, then if you're using it for a non-commercial purpose and you credit the person, you can use it. A stock photo site, yes, as long as you credit in the way that the site requires. If you do not credit in the way the site requires, again, you are on the wrong side of copyright law and you may be required to take your image down or to not share it. And sometimes that means that if you make something you really like, you can't share it in your portfolio and you can't use it to get work. So a little credit goes a long way here. And you may still need to pay a usage fee from stock photo sites. A lot of them you do need to. And I'll make that clear when I go through the list in the next video where you need to pay and where you don't. Creative Commons licenses. Yes, you can use those as long as you use them in the way that the license requires. So just always be sure you know what's allowed and what's not allowed, what credit you need to give in order to use your image appropriately.